On to Supreme Court cases. Like one of my favorite parts about AP government are the Supreme Court cases. They are just fun because they really tell the story of how our government has changed and the influence of the Supreme Court, of course. It's just fun stuff. I love it. So, our first case we're getting ready to do. So, you should have one of these yellow sheets of paper. If you're in class, I should have given all these out to you, or maybe I mailed them to you if you're doing only online. So I don't know what I did, but hopefully you have a copy of this. If you don't, then there should be access to a Google Doc version that you can print and then handwrite it, or make that document in Google Docs and type it out and then print it. You want a hard copy of it because you need to study it. All right, that's probably the best way to do it. All right, cool. So here's the first case. So you're gonna fill out as we go. Now it has a pair reading part at the top. Summarize the case from Oyez. If we do this in class, then we'll do that in class. If not, just skip it, and you're going to start with unit, case name, issue. Now, this is unit one, by the way, so we're starting with unit one, and then we'll go through case name, issue, and then we'll go down. You just keep filling in the boxes as we go. Facts, there usually are 3 or 4 bullet points there, so be careful that you don't write too much. Make sure you have some room there to, or write too big, I should say. And that way you've got room to write what we're going to put. Okay, here we go. All right, so unit one, McCulloch versus Maryland. Oh, yes. The Unit 1 cases deal with federalism. We've been talking a lot about federalism and this relationship between the states and the federal government. And McCulloch v. Maryland in 1819, is a huge issue dealing with federalism. All right, here's the issue. The issue is, can Maryland tax a U.S. federal bank? Can Maryland tax a U.S. federal bank? And this is more generic, just like, can a state tax a U.S. entity, a federal entity? And by the way, so what happens is that the U.S. Opens a bank, all right, and the U.S. opens it in Maryland, and James McCulloch is put in charge of it. He's the cashier guy. He's the one in charge of the bank. And Maryland doesn't like this. They think that the federal government has gone beyond its enumerated powers. And so what they do is they pass a tax on the bank. And basically, if the federal government had paid the tax, it would ruin the bank. Like literally, it was so high, this tax on the bank, that it would literally destroy it. So James McCulloch, the person running the bank, says, like, no, not paying it. So he doesn't pay it. And then Maryland sues. They go to state court. The state Supreme Court rules in favor of Maryland. However, if you lose in state court, you can appeal, and that goes directly to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court took the case. If you don't know this, the Supreme Court doesn't have to take a case if it doesn't want to. It only takes cases that it deems important. In this case, big time important. All right, so here's what happens. All right, key clause or amendment in dispute. There are 2, actually, and they both come from of course, the Constitution. One comes from Article 1, which is the necessary and proper clause. The necessary and proper clause. And the second is from Article 6. Remember, 6 supremacy. 6 supremacy has to do with the supremacy clause. So, necessary and proper clause and the supremacy clause. Those are the 2 issues here that the Supreme Court's going to be dealing with as they make a decision on McCulloch v. Maryland 1819. All right, here we go. Facts of the case. This is where you're going to have several bullet points, so don't write too big. All right, U.S. Bank was created in Maryland. I already told you that. Maryland taxes the bank. I told you that. I'll give you a second to write it. U.S. Bank created in Maryland. Maryland taxes it because they're like, no, you can't do this. McCulloch runs the bank, and he refuses to pay the tax. James McCulloch runs the bank. He refuses to pay the tax. He tells him basically go pound sand. He's like, you can't tax federal government. Maryland sues. They argue that the Constitution does not enumerate the power to make a bank. So there's the key right there. They argue that the Constitution doesn't enumerate the power to make a bank. Therefore, Congress can't make a bank. The state court says yes. We'll see what the Supreme Court says in a moment. All right, good. Pause it if you need to, but we're moving on to the next thing. All right, key question. Can the U.S. create a bank? That's the first question. Is it like the fact that it's not directly enumerated and says U.S. can create a bank? Can it do that? And then 2, did Maryland act unconstitutionally taxing the bank? So basically, can Maryland tax a bank? Those are the key questions. Can the U.S. create a bank? And did Maryland act unconstitutionally? Remember, this is all about federalism and like the relationship between the states and the federal government. And if the states can tax a federal entity, then the states are very powerful indeed. Here's the vote: 6-0 for McCulloch. Like the state of Maryland gets whipped. Like it's bad. They lose badly. They get whooped. All right, 6-0 for McCulloch. All right, what's the decision? The ruling is this: it is necessary and proper for Congress to create a bank. Pretty straightforward. It is necessary and proper. So there's a necessary and proper clause. Like Congress has to create a bank because it has all these different enumerated powers that deal with money. And so therefore, it would be necessary to create a bank to do those powers. So it's implied through other powers. So this is why we talked about implied powers versus enumerated powers. The enumerated power is create a currency, set the value of that currency, borrow money, all these different things the federal government can do. And then it's implied that through it, Supreme Court says that you can make a bank, a national bank. And the second part is the Constitution and congressional law is supreme. So Maryland can't tax a U.S. bank. So as long as Congress is passing a law that's legitimate under the Constitution, in this case it was because it's implied through the necessary and proper clause, then therefore congressional law is supreme, and therefore Maryland cannot tax the U.S. bank. So this is a real blow to Maryland and for state power, frankly. All right, moving on. There's a famous line in it, and it's slightly covered up. I apologize for that. And Chief Marshall says in this famous line, you might want to write down, the power to tax is the power to destroy. I'll read it again because you probably can't see it really well. But Chief Marshall said, the power to tax is the power to destroy. So therefore, Maryland can't tax the U.S. bank because then it's basically like Maryland is able to destroy the U.S. bank. And that would override the supremacy clause in Article 6. So can't do. No go there, Maryland. No go. Nice try, but no. All right. Lastly, at the bottom, we have this thing called a dissent. A dissent is when a justice on the Supreme Court disagrees with the decision and they write why the majority is wrong. In this case, it was 6-0. Everybody voted with the majority, so therefore there is no dissent in this case. So we don't have to worry about that. We're done with that. All right, cool. All right, that's the first case. You got to study it. Use your whiteboard and write out the facts and the decision. That's the key thing, the facts and the decision, especially and also the amendments that are dealt with. Cool.